in this section, we want to look at the details of partitioning, the most important step in Quicksort. All right, so for the implementation step, so let's look at the situation we have. So we are given an array. So here, let me represent in this way. Yeah. Although here, we know usually we use n as the data size, but here I use this capital N. The reason you can see below, for the two subarrays, we use that m and n. So when we split, we get two subarrays. We use the size m and n. So here we do not want to get confused with the original data size. All right. So the split, the critical condition for the split is this. Okay. So how do we make that happen? This condition. Yeah. So how do we implement? How do we arrange the array elements to get this condition satisfied? All right? Yeah. How to determine the boundary of two subarrays? Because the two subarray, we need some element to separate these two subarrays. So that is the boundary element we want to find. All right? Yeah. There is an uncertainty regarding the size of these two subarrays. Uncertainty. We don't know any information about the sizes of these two subarrays. Yeah. So that is uncertain. So we want to make it certain. But how to make it certain? Yeah. So let's draw a diagram here. Okay. So in order to define those two subarrays, we want to know their borderline. So what is their borderline? Okay. So which element separates these two subarrays? Yeah. Here we can call that reference element. So that element, so we use that as a reference. So all other elements will be compared with this element. Okay, so that's the reference element. All right. So this reference element should be somewhere in the array. Yeah, so let's put it here. Okay. And so you can see after we put that special element here, then we have two subarrays. One, second one here, all right? Yeah, so two subarrays with this condition. So that's what we want to get, all right? And this condition actually the same as this one, okay? Yeah. All right. Then let's look at that special element. Okay. Yeah. So let's call it P element here. Okay. So this P element should be between A array and a B array. So this is the last element in A array if it is sorted. Yeah. Although we do not assume it is sorted, but if it is sorted, that's the last element. If B array is sorted, this is the first element. Then the P should be the one between these two elements. Okay? Yeah, we insert it. Yeah. All right. But here, when we arrange the elements of A array, we do not assume they are sorted. The B elements, we do not assume they are sorted. Okay, yeah. But this P element clearly separate those two subarrays. Yeah. With condition, all the A elements, their values are less than or equal to P. For the B array, all the B elements, their values are greater or equal to P. So you can see this P is so special. So we need these two conditions. If we combine these two conditions, then we get that condition we really want to get. All right. So we call this critical element the pivot element. Pivot. Okay? It is the pivot. Okay? Yeah. So for this pivot element, it has some key property here. So the property is this element is in place. Yeah. So this is the final location when the whole array is sorted. So that's what we call it, in place. All right, yeah. So after one partition, this pivot element is in place. Okay. All right. Now, we know the pivot element is so important. The question is, which element should we choose as the pivot element? So now let's discuss this question. Yeah. Any element has an equal role in the array because we do not have any information related to the values of the elements. So without any information, then any element has the equal opportunity to be selected as the pivot. Okay? So there is no reason to favor any particular element. Okay? Random selection. All right. So although it could be a random selection, the exact meaning of this random selection, value-wise, so here we are talking about the values of these elements. So the pivot element has certain value, right? And we don't know any information about that value. So although we like to select some element whose value is in the middle, the best selection is the median. So if we can easily get a median of this array, then that's the best element for the pivot because it's right in the middle. It separates two subarrays with almost equal size. That's the most balanced partition. Okay? But finding a median is so expensive. We don't want to spend so much time to find the median. So usually we do not consider the median. Okay? All right. So then for this step, we just select arbitrary element. We can use arbitrary element as the pivot. But here, arbitrary, we talk about value point of view, arbitrary. Okay, so value-wise, pivot. Okay. All right, but for those elements, there is another consideration, position-wise. Each element has a position, and those positions are not equally, they do not have the equal role. Some positions are quite different from other positions. Yeah, so let's look at here. For example, suppose we select an element with the position like this, somewhere in the middle of the array. Okay? Is it a good choice? So if we try to do the partition, is it a good choice? Let's look at it. First, is it in place? In general, it's not, because you select arbitrary one. How do you know it is in place? So in general, it is not in place, right? Yeah. When moving other elements, because when we do partitioning, we may need to move elements around. Some elements we want to move from right to left. Some element we want to move from left to right. Move elements around. But when we do that, this element becomes a roadblock. Roadblock. Okay? Yeah. Because when you move, you hit this one, you have to do something special. When you move from right, you hit this one, you have to do something special. So it becomes a roadblock. So that's not very convenient. Okay? All right. So if the element is not in place, it is okay. So we can take it. But if it is a roadblock, so we don't like it. So, okay. So now let's try to look at if there are other positions that can give us some convenience. All right. Which element is not a roadblock? Yeah. So let's look at that. Is there some special elements in the array? We won't have that, when we move elements around, we won't have that roadblock thing, right? So these two elements. Yeah, because when you move elements around, you do not need to do anything on the first one or the last one. Okay? So they do not block any other elements. So that means the elements in these two positions are most convenient for the pivot role. Okay? All right. So based on this analysis, then we know which one we should select as the pivot. All right. Now let's do the partition step. All right. Usually we take the last element as the pivot. Yeah. You can take the first one, no difference. Yeah, but they have the equal performance. Yeah. So let's use the last one. All right. To do next, we want to scan the whole array once. In one scan, we want to rearrange the elements to satisfy our key condition. Okay? All right. So the condition we want, all the elements at the left-hand side of P, or all the elements that are less than or equal to P, we put in an A array. For all the elements that are greater or equal to P, greater, because equal, so here, equal we put at the A array. So B array we do not put equal. Okay? Although if you want, it's okay. Yeah. All right. Then, here you can see for all elements less than or equal to P, that's in the A array. For all elements greater than P, then we put in B array. Okay. After that, you can see A array, all the elements are in consecutive locations. For B array, all the elements are in consecutive locations. Okay? Because we do comparison with P, so we can get that. Okay? All right. Then the last step, we need to put this P back in place. So somewhere between A array and a B array, back in place. So that's the partition. That's the partition. So here, you see, that's the basic steps for the partition. All right, so that's the B.2. Next, let's go to B.3. So we want to get more details about the partitioning.